If you walked into the very store you founded, but were kicked out because you didn't look the part, what would you do? If there is one moment that reveals exactly what someone truly thinks of you, it's the moment you walk through a door they believe you don't belong behind. That morning, the sky over Beverly Hills was unusually clear, sunlight glittering on the diamond displays of Leclerc and Rose, the most prestigious jewelry store on Rodeo Drive. And in the midst of all that luxury and brilliance, a black woman stepped inside. She wore a simple navy blue suit, an old silver bracelet on her wrist, and eyes that were calm yet unwavering. Her name was Celeste Morgan, and no one in that store knew she was the founder and CEO of the very brand they were working for. But the store manager, Mallory Greaves, didn't need to know that. All she needed to see was the neatly tied curls, shoes that didn't belong on any runway, and a presence so calm it became unsettling. "I don't care who you are," Mallory said loudly, her voice sharp enough to slice through glass. "You need to leave this store immediately, or I'll call security." The air froze. A customer turned away, pretending not to hear. A young sales associate dropped her pen. Celeste didn't flinch. She didn't need to respond with words, because her eyes that had once stared down Wall Street's toughest investors, spoke volumes. They carried the weight of long-suppressed anger, not explosive but restrained. The quiet, chilling composure of someone who knows she's being insulted and is waiting for her accuser to fall on their own sword. Mallory reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police. You look like a thief." But before she could press a button, Celeste calmly raised her own phone. Her hand did not tremble. "Go ahead," she said softly, "but let me make my call first." And in that exact moment, everything began to change. No one in that store, not even Mallory, had the slightest idea they were about to witness the most defining morning of their careers. Not everyone can choose simplicity once they've reached the top. But for Celeste Morgan, that choice was never a sacrifice. She didn't like luxury cars, had no interest in gold watches, and had never been fond of having bodyguards escort her while inspecting her stores. The only thing she carried each time she made an unannounced visit to a Morgan Atelier location was a silver necklace her mother once wore, a piece of jewelry with no significant monetary value, but holding every memory of the woman who raised her with nothing but her own two hands. Celeste had kept the same routine since the early days of building her company. Each morning, she woke at 5 a.m., brewed a pot of ginger tea, read the news for 20 minutes, and chose which store to drop in on that day, quietly, without notice. This time, she chose Leclerc and Rose, Beverly Hills, the flagship location once celebrated as the heart of the brand by Vogue magazine. Before setting off, she quietly adjusted the rearview mirror of her 2004 Honda Civic, the first car she bought with the money from selling her very first piece of jewelry. Many people asked why she hadn't upgraded to a car more fitting for a CEO. She only smiled and said, "Because this one still runs just fine. And every time I see it, I remember where I started." Even though her company generated $180 million in annual revenue, and her clientele included some of the most famous names in the world, Celeste never let the spotlight blur her vision. Today was no different. When she parked on the curb of Rodeo Drive, surrounded by gleaming Bentleys and Porsches, a few curious glances turned her way. But she paid them no mind. She had seen those looks before. Only today, someone was about to learn that sometimes the most valuable thing isn't what you wear or drive, but the quiet power of a woman who dares to walk into a place others believe she doesn't belong. Inside the store, light from the crystal ceiling reflected off every glass surface, creating a dazzling, almost surreal world. Celeste walked past the display cases like any ordinary customer. No one recognized her, and that was exactly what she wanted. She didn't need a business card, didn't need to announce who she was. What she wanted was to see how the store truly operated when the founder wasn't watching. When her gaze landed on the Vega Diamonds collection, the brand's most expensive diamond line, she didn't blink. This was the pinnacle of Morgan Atelier's craftsmanship, centered around a diamond worth $350,000. She had personally selected each stone for this collection, demanded precision cuts down to fractions of a millimeter. But now, she was just a stranger standing before jewelry far too costly for someone with her appearance. Or at least, that was how Mallory Greaves saw it. "Can I help you with something?" Mallory's voice rang out, sweet but insincere. Celeste turned, meeting a half smile and a scrutinizing look hiding behind thick mascara. "I'd like to see the Vega collection," Celeste replied, her tone calm and measured. A beat of silence. Then Mallory lowered her voice. "These pieces are typically reserved for clients with appointments. They start at $200,000. Celeste smiled. "I know. I still want to see them." Mallory reluctantly unlocked the display case, her movements slow, as if she feared someone might touch the jewels without proper status. As Celeste leaned in close to inspect the centerpiece diamond, she tilted her head slightly and nodded. "Origin, Colombia. Cut is accurate, but the prong setting is slightly misaligned." Mallory froze. She hadn't expected this plainly dressed black woman to spot such a subtle flaw. "Are you a jeweler?" Mallory asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Celeste didn't answer immediately. She simply rotated the stone between two fingers, as if reading the history embedded in its facets. And in those few seconds of silence, Mallory began to feel something she couldn't explain, an unease that crept in quietly and settled beneath her polished exterior. Just as Mallory was reluctantly standing next to Celeste, the chime over the door rang out, signaling a new customer. A couple stepped inside. Walter and Helen Barrington, longtime clients, white, impeccably dressed. They didn't need to speak. Their presence alone was enough. Mallory immediately pulled her hand away from the open display case, abandoning Celeste beside the exposed diamond. "Excuse me," she said briskly, never once looking at Celeste, then turned away as if the woman had never existed. Mallory walked quickly toward the couple, her expression lighting up in a way that seemed almost celebratory. "Walter, Helen, what an honor to see you today. Celebrating something special." Celeste remained by the open case, her eyes following Mallory's every move. Mallory poured champagne for her guests, pulled out chairs with exaggerated grace, and presented each piece of jewelry as though it were part of a private luxury showcase. Meanwhile, Celeste, the very creator of all that splendor, was treated like a stranger borrowing space in a room she no longer belonged to. Worse still, in a moment of careless whispering, Celeste caught Mallory's voice, murmuring to the couple, "Apologies for the delay earlier. We've had a few unfamiliar faces coming in lately, trying on pieces with unclear intentions." That statement wasn't just insulting. It cut like an invisible blade. Celeste was no stranger to discrimination. It had followed her from classrooms to boardrooms, from business conferences to city sidewalks. But never, not once, had she been treated this way inside the very place she had built from nothing. Across the room, a young sales associate named Lola stood silently, watching. She had seen it all. She had heard everything. And in her gaze, for the first time that day, Celeste saw a flicker of hope. But she remained silent. She stood her ground, a stranger inside the very dream she had made real. 15 minutes passed. Celeste remained standing by the open display of the collection, unnoticed by anyone. The gemstones still shimmered as beautifully as when she had personally selected them, but the light inside her had begun to dim. She slowly walked toward Mallory, waiting until the woman paused her conversation with the guests. "I still want to see the Vega," she said softly, almost overly polite. Mallory turned, her expression laced with irritation and contempt. "I think you'd be more comfortable in the costume jewelry section," she said loudly, making sure the surrounding customers could hear. "Items like this require serious financial commitment." Celeste tightened her fingers slightly, but her voice remained steady. "I want to buy the Vega, the $350,000 necklace." Mallory laughed. Not the courteous kind of laugh, but a hollow, mocking one. "I'll need to see proof of funds," she said. "Credit card, bank statement, anything that shows you can afford it." Celeste raised her head and looked Mallory directly in the eyes. "Is that the standard policy for all customers?" Mallory didn't answer right away. She glanced toward the Barringtons, still trying on rings, none of whom had been asked for documentation. "For transactions of this size, yes," she lied smoothly. And in that instant, Celeste understood. She had given Mallory every opportunity. She had endured as a guest. But now, she would act as the owner. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. For the first time, the atmosphere around her froze. The couple turned to look. Lola lifted her head. A few phones discreetly began recording. And Mallory, the woman who had always maintained control, finally felt something slipping out of her grasp. The atmosphere inside the store suddenly grew heavy, as if every light on the ceiling could sense the shift that was coming. Celeste stood tall, her gaze no longer soft like when she had first entered. Her hand slipped into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a sleek phone. But no one noticed the quiet elegance of that gesture. Every eye turned toward her when her voice rose, so soft that only those paying close attention would realize it was a command. "Hello, this is Celeste Morgan. I need to initiate an emergency meeting with the executive board. Immediately. Location, Beverly Hills." Each word rang clear, not loud, but powerful enough to make everyone nearby freeze. Mallory blinked, the mockery in her tone from earlier beginning to crack. Who are you calling?" Celeste did not respond. She turned away, continuing the call as her eyes remained fixed on the Vega collection, as if re-identifying every stone from memory. At the front desk, Lola silently set down the phone, her face drained of color. She had just confirmed through the internal system that Celeste Morgan, the woman being told to leave the store, was in fact the CEO and founder of Morgan Atelier. Ezra, the assistant manager who had remained quiet the entire time, now stood frozen. His expression shifted dramatically as he began to grasp the weight of what was unfolding. "No way," he muttered, eyes still locked on Celeste. Meanwhile, Mallory was struggling to steady her voice, the tone starting to break. "If you think you can call someone to intimidate me, I warn you," Celeste interrupted without even turning her head. "I'm not trying to intimidate anyone. I'm reporting an issue directly to the highest authorities in my company." A chilling silence followed. And then, like a domino effect, the entire store began to react. Customers quietly raised their phones to record. Staff looked around in confusion, and Mallory, for the first time today, was completely speechless. Celeste calmly ended the call and returned the phone to her coat pocket, the motion precise and deliberate, as if she had just signed off on an important contract, something she did every day. But today, the contract was not on paper. It was unfolding in real time on the store floor, where she was about to redraw the line between justice and pretense. She walked slowly toward the central display, where Mallory now stood frozen like a statue. Every eye in the store followed Celeste's every step, while she moved with the composure of someone reviewing a design blueprint, not confronting the person who had just publicly insulted her. "You said this store is under your management?" Celeste asked, her voice not raised but sharp as forged steel. Mallory nodded stiffly. "I'm the store manager. I have full authority to decide who gets served." Celeste smiled, not with anger, but with a quiet kind of contempt. She slowly reached into her wallet and pulled out a small, sleek item that caught the light. A business card embossed in silver ink, simple yet commanding. She held it up at Mallory's eye level, letting her read every word. Celeste Morgan, Chairwoman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer, Morgan Atelier. Mallory stared at the card, her eyes for the first time unable to conceal the rising panic. Her mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no sound came out. Celeste did not smirk, did not gloat, did not even show satisfaction. She simply asked, her tone quiet and unwavering, "Do you still believe this store is yours?" In the corner, Lola clenched her fists. Another employee stepped back and nearly dropped a tray of jewelry. And the customers, those who had once passively benefited from invisible privilege, now stood in silence, realizing they had just witnessed the moment a game was entirely overturned, with nothing more than a small business card. Mallory remained frozen in place, her hand clutching the hem of her blouse as if trying to hold on to the last remnants of power slipping away piece by piece. Her face had gone pale, with no trace left of the woman who had so openly scorned a customer less than half an hour ago. But Celeste refused to let emotion take over. She didn't raise her voice, didn't slam her hand on a counter, didn't resort to harsh words. Instead, she stepped into the center of the store, where every employee and customer could hear her, and began to speak. "I founded Morgan Atelier on one guiding principle. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with absolute respect, regardless of wealth, skin color, or hairstyle." She paused, casting a glance at Mallory, then shifted her gaze to everyone else. And today, I witnessed that principle being distorted, right here, in the most important store of this brand. She turned to Lola, the young receptionist who had silently observed everything from the start, with quiet concern. "You were the only one who watched this unfold with eyes unclouded by judgment. You didn't interfere, but you saw clearly." Then she looked at Ezra. "You didn't act immediately, but when something felt wrong, you didn't look away. You understood that silence is not neutrality, and I respect that." Finally, she stopped in front of Mallory. Her expression no longer showed anger, but pure disappointment. "And you didn't just discriminate. You did it to the person who signs your paycheck. Worse still, you did it in front of customers, turning toxicity into a public performance." Mallory broke down in sobs, starting to stammer an apology, but Celeste raised a hand to stop her. "I don't need an apology. I need a clear action." Then she turned back to Lola. From now on, you are the assistant manager of this store." And with a firm nod, Celeste gave Mallory one final look. "And you? Gather your things. You no longer work here." Mallory collapsed into the chair, her eyes blurred with tears as if she had just received the heaviest sentence of her life. "I have a child. I have loans. I just wanted to protect the store's reputation," she whispered, her voice trembling between pleading and panic. But Celeste stood still, her gaze no longer angry but quiet, as if she was witnessing something she had seen many times before. And it was always the same. "What reputation?" Celeste asked, gently but directly. "The store's, or the prejudice you carry with you every day to work?" Mallory didn't answer. She only sobbed louder. "I can change. I'll learn to treat people better. Please don't ruin my entire life over one mistake." Celeste studied her for a long moment, as if peeling back layers of sincerity and defense. Then she spoke, her voice low but clear. "This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern, a system of belief you brought into this job, into every interaction with a customer who didn't look the way you expected. And today, you let it show in front of everyone." She turned to the people around her. "I don't need anyone to be perfect. I don't need my employees to recite every service protocol word for word. But I do need them to understand that respecting others is never optional." Mallory buried her face in her hands, and though no one said anything, the silence in the room made it clear. There was nothing left to salvage. Celeste walked to the center of the store and adjusted the diamond in the display case. It had been slightly tilted from the beginning, but no one noticed except her. A small gesture, yet symbolic of something greater, restoring order, returning value to the things that had been overlooked. Then she turned back and looked at the entire staff and the customers. "If anyone here feels uncomfortable for having witnessed this today," she said, "then I apologize. But silence is the most dangerous thing of all. And today, I chose not to be silent." The store gradually returned to a state of quiet, but not the hollow kind. It was the stillness that follows a storm. Celeste stood in the middle of the space she once designed from its earliest sketches, watching as each employee returned to their tasks with cautious eyes, yet renewed determination. The customers remained. No one left. Some still held up their phones to film, while others simply stood and reflected. An older woman approached and gently touched Celeste's arm. "You didn't just preserve your dignity," she said softly. "You just taught us what true class really looks like." Celeste nodded, her gaze softening. She turned to Lola, now the assistant manager, and said, "You have a bright future if you keep the integrity you showed today. Remember, real power doesn't lie in your title, but in how you treat those with less." Then she gestured to Ezra. "You'll be overseeing all operations for the time being, and I want an internal report, not for punishment, but to rebuild our training from the ground up." Marcus, the security guard who had remained neutral throughout the incident, stepped forward with respectful posture. "Ms. Morgan, I'll escort Ms. Mallory out." Celeste shook her head. "There's no need. Let her leave with what's left of her dignity. That's the last thing I can offer her." By then, Mallory had finished gathering her things and walked out through the door like a shadow. No one clapped. No one watched her go. But everyone knew. A chapter had just been turned. As the glass door shut behind her, Celeste turned to look at the diamond in the display case. It was no longer misaligned. A small detail, but to her it was a symbol that the most precious things are not found in outward luxury, but in the ability to uphold order and dignity in all circumstances. "We will stay open," she said aloud, her voice clear and resolute. but from this day forward, not just to sell jewelry, but to prove that respect holds value just like diamonds. And in the empire I built, that value is not up for negotiation. In the world of business, true power does not lie in giving orders, but in how a leader handles injustice with calm and conviction. Celeste never had to raise her voice to prove her worth. She let her actions speak for themselves. If you believe that respect should never be determined by appearances, please like this video, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories, and leave a comment with the phrase "Hold your dignity" to help spread this message.